Well, good afternoon. I know we're all eager to get things back to normal, and no one wants to get the economy going and get people back to work more than I do. And that means having a responsible plan. It means taking the best scientific advice and working together with our partners. It means recognizing that the situation is different in different parts of Ontario. It means moving cautiously but decisively. And most importantly, it means doing everything necessary to keep people safe as we reopen. And today, we're taking the next step. It starts this Friday, June the 12th at 12:01 a.m., with increasing the limits on social gatherings from 5 to 10 people. I know that staying apart from our friends and loved ones has been one of the hardest parts of the last few months. And hopefully today's announcement will bring some relief. I also know that for so many of us, the restrictions around places of worship have been extremely hard. During these uncertain times, our faith has never been more important. That's why I've asked that places of worship across the province be able to reopen as of June the 12th at 12:01 a.m. at 30% building capacity. These are important steps to getting life back to normal, but we also need to get people back to work. We need to get the economy going, and to do this as quickly as possible. We're moving forward with a regional approach, and we're moving forward with an approach that lets us make decisions for specific parts of Ontario based on what's happening on the ground, based on the advice of the Chief Medical Officer of Health, our command table, and our local public health experts. Most regions in Ontario will be allowed to proceed to Stage 2 this Friday, June the 12th. We will continue to keep a close eye on regions that will not open this Friday, and we need just a little more time. We will continue talking to local officials who are playing a critical role in determining what areas can open, and I am confident that the rest of the province will get to Stage 2 very, very soon. And the good news is Stage 2 will allow people to resume many parts of their daily life. Wedding venues and religious places of worship will be able to host wedding ceremonies with a 10-person limit. Drive-in and drive-through venues for theaters, concerts, animal attractions, and art installations. Beauty salons, hairdressers, barber shops, day spas, and other personal care services, with the exception of facial services. Indoor shopping malls, with the food courts restricted to takeout. Restaurants and bars will be allowed to open their patios. Summer day camps will be able to open as well. More camping at Ontario parks and private campgrounds, as well as beach access. Libraries, community centers, museums, and galleries with physical distancing and capacity limits. Tour and guide services, including bike, walking, and bus tours. Recreational amenities, including splash pads, wading pools, and swimming pools. And training for outdoor team sports. And tomorrow, we'll release our plan to reopen childcare to support parents returning to work. And for the regions that must wait a little longer, I ask you please remain patient. We will get there soon. My friends, we're making progress. It's a sign we're on the right track. And for many small business owners, today's announcement is good news because our small businesses are struggling right now. And for them, making rent is top of mind. That's why we work to get $900 million to help businesses with commercial rent relief. And as I was clear with commercial landlords, you have to be fair and help out everyone. But we still heard about some landlords who just didn't get the message. Well, I'm here for the little guy. That's why I've ordered legislation to ban commercial evictions for those who qualify for the commercial rent relief program. The ban would take effect for evictions on or after June the 3rd and last until August 31st. Our small business owners are the backbone of our communities. And now, more than ever, we all need to support them. So please, get out there, buy local. Support your local small businesses. We all need to support others right now. And together, We will come back stronger than ever before. Thank you, and God bless the people of Ontario. Now I'll pass it over to Minister Elliott.
Thank you, Premier, and good afternoon. Because of the considerable and ongoing efforts of all Ontarians to stop the spread of COVID-19, many regions of the province have met the criteria to move to the next stage of reopening, including an improvement in public health trends as testing has been significantly scaled up, as well as maintaining hospital capacity to respond to any spikes in cases or outbreaks. As we know, different regions of Ontario have experienced COVID-19 differently. In response, we are taking a regional approach that recognizes that in many areas of the province, it is safe to ease restrictions and reopen more businesses. Indeed, in some areas, there have been fewer or no new cases of this virus in recent days and weeks. That is why most of the province's 34 public health units will transition to Stage 2 this Friday. However, where we haven't seen our public health criteria met, and in consultation with local medical officers of health, certain public health units will remain in the first stage. That includes those that make up the Golden Horseshoe: Durham, York, Toronto, Peel, Halton, Hamilton, and Niagara, as well as border regions, Windsor-Essex and Lambton, as we continue to keep a close eye on essential travelers. Haldimand Norfolk will also remain in Stage 1 until we are confident that the impacts of an outbreak are contained and don't extend into the broader community. I recognize the desire for more communities to move forward, for more families to get back to work. That is why our government will make more resources available to support the extensive efforts already underway to stop the spread of COVID-19. In doing so, we will ensure that every region of Ontario continues to gradually reopen. As we continue to monitor local trends, every Monday the province will provide a progress report on the public health units remaining in the first stage. If public health indicators improve at a local level, regions will be given the green light to enter Stage 2 that following Friday. This includes lower rates of transmission in local communities, increased capacity in hospitals, and continued progress in testing. Our gradual regional approach will help ensure we build on our successes as a province while ensuring we continue to protect the health and safety of all Ontarians. Thank you, and now to you, Minister Phillips.
Thank you very much, Minister Elliott, and good afternoon. Stage 2 of the second phase is another stop on the journey set out in a framework to reopen our province. The roadmap we outlined on April the 27th to safely get the people of Ontario back to work. The journey isn't over. In fact, as restrictions are lifted, personal responsibility will be more important than ever to avoid a step backwards. But we have every reason to be confident and to trust each other. Since the essential business list was announced in March, people and employers have demonstrated incredible patience and leadership by following the public health advice and guidance necessary to keep each other safe. This has continued since we entered Stage 1 of the second phase and has made me confident that we are on the right course. No plan is perfect, but this is new terrain for all of us, and we're in it together. You have trusted your government to do what is necessary to contain this global pandemic. But the trust is a two-way street. We trust you to continue acting responsibly, look out for each other, and do your part to stop the spread. This has saved lives, and keeping it up will get more people back to work sooner. Stage 2 of the second phase means we'll be able to dine safely on the patio of our favorite restaurant or go to the shopping mall. Since announcing a framework to reopen our province, Ontario's Jobs and Recovery Committee has been working with the health and scientific experts to reopen the province as soon as it's safe to do so. Our regional approach to Stage 2 is going to safely get more people back to work as soon as possible. We've been talking to business and labor leaders, nonprofits, municipalities, and members of cultural and faith communities to understand their unique needs. We are grateful for their input. It has informed every step we've taken on our reopening plan. And we are grateful for people's patience. I know that anxiety remains, and these unprecedented times can be confusing. The people of Ontario have every reason to be confident as we step into stage 2 of the second phase. The health and long-term well-being of our province will continue to guide every decision we make and every step in our plan. The people of Ontario have acted responsibly throughout the global pandemic. I'm confident that will continue in stage 2 and beyond. Our collective health and the economic recovery depends on it. And now I'll hand it over to Minister Fedeli.
Good afternoon to the business leaders and service providers who have shouldered the responsibility of reopening their business responsibly to protect both employees and customers. Thank you. Our government will continue to be there for you as we have with targeted tax relief, WSIB payment deferrals, and more affordable electricity bills. Through the Ontario Together portal and the Ontario Together Fund, we've mobilized our manufacturing innovation might to develop made-in-Ontario solutions to ensure we're prepared now and in the future. We provided workplace safety guidelines to protect workers and customers. Through the Workplace PPE Supplier Directory, businesses can find over 400 companies that are offering items such as face shields, sanitizer, plexiglass guards, and more of what they need to reopen safely. This continued Ontario spirit will be vital as we move towards a safe stage 2 reopening. We have a solid foundation on which to build our future, a thoughtful, responsible approach that will ensure Ontario emerges stronger than ever and remains the economic engine of Canada. Thank you, and now I'll pass it over to Minister McNaughton.
Thank you, Minister Fedeli. Good afternoon, everyone. As workplaces across Ontario begin to open, we want everyone in the province to know there is a wealth of resources available to them. This includes safety guidelines. It also includes graphics and explainers. It includes posters, videos, and tip sheets. These resources will give you the tools you need to stay safe at work and keep your customers and clients safe as well. You can find them at ontario.ca/COVID safety. This page has gotten 560,000 page views since it was launched. There are 105 guidance documents currently posted there. And by week's end, every workplace allowed to reopen in the province will be covered. Businesses know that our government is committed to working with you, because we know that we can only be successful when all of us, business, labor, and government, work together. Before I go, I'd like to acknowledge all of the everyday heroes who got us through the past several months. Those on the front lines keeping food on the shelves and important services available. Thank you to all of you. You've earned the gratitude and respect of our entire province. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to the phone line for questions. First question.
First question comes from Rob Ferguson from the Toronto Star. Please go ahead.
Hi, Rob.
Hey, hi, Premier. Just wanted to check if there are going to be any travel restrictions in the province in areas where things are open. Like, could people go to Brantford or London to get a haircut? I asked this last week, and you had been concerned previously about people, violating the spirit of these guidelines.
Well, before I pass it over to Minister McNaughton on that, I've heard from a lot of cottage country mayors that are saying, come up north, and before I said bring your own supplies, now they're saying, come and shop in the local stores. But that's one example, and I guess more people are going to be heading up there July 1st, but I'll pass it over to the Minister.
Well, thank you, Rob, for that question. Look, my role in this as Minister of Labour, Training and Skills Development is to ensure that workers are safe. And what we've done as a ministry is provided over 105 guidelines to businesses across the province, to organizations, to places of worship, to ensure that workers are safe and their customers are safe who are traveling to those businesses. Furthermore, we've also enhanced health and safety inspections across the province. We now have about 500 inspectors communicating health and safety guidelines to businesses in Brantford and London and all across the province. I'm proud to say that during the COVID-19 outbreak, we've done nearly 10,000 workplace investigations, issued 5,500 orders to ensure that workplaces improve their conditions for workers, and we've shut down 22 job sites, so those job sites and workplaces can improve. But we'll continue to monitor the situation and ensure that health and safety of every worker and customer is protected in Ontario.
Follow up.
Okay, thanks for that. So no travel restrictions. Next question is the document on stage 2 also says no concerts or major sports for the foreseeable future. So what does that portend for the CFL? What does that portend for Major League Baseball if it wants to come back locally this summer?
Well, we're going to have to sit down and work with the MLB and CFL. We've been in conversations, as I've mentioned before, Rob, with the NHL on being the list when they're going to restart the NHL on August the 1st. But there's discussions that we need to have with the other two. So once we have those, I'll come out and tell you how those went.
Next question.
Next question comes from Alison Jones from the Canadian Press. Please go ahead.
Hi, Alison.
Hi, Premier. First, just to follow up on Rob's first question, I just want to be clear about what the advice is to Ontarians about leaving their region. Are you telling people from the GTHA that they can, say, go to Prince Edward County for a wine tour or go camping up north?
Yeah, that's fine. We opened up the camping grounds, both Ontario campgrounds and private campgrounds, so they can travel. But when it comes to haircuts, I'm hanging in here right to the last minute until people within the approved until we change over to stage 2, I should say, in Toronto, GTA, and some other regions. Unfortunately, the hair salons and barbers won't be able to stay open. And I just want to explain this real quickly. Our health table and our chief medical officer doesn't make these decisions by himself. He consults with the regions, the chief medical officers in the regions, and through consultation with the local chief medical officers, that's what determined who stays open and who has to stay closed just for a little bit longer.
And I wanted to also ask about the concept of 2 household bubbles. I know it's something you and the health minister have talked a little bit about in the past, and even though the province is moving to restrictions on gatherings from 5 to 10, it still says your contact of getting within 2 meters of somebody else should be limited to people within your direct household. So is the concept of family and household bubbling not coming even for those regions covered in stage 2?
Yeah, well, I'll pass this over to the Minister of Health.
Well, the increase in numbers from 5 to 10 really will include social distancing or physical distancing as well, but we have talked about the concept of bubbling, putting people together without being concerned with physical distancing. It's something that we're still discussing, but not something that Dr. Williams feels that we are ready to do in Ontario just yet. But that is something that we're looking at the best way to do it and the appropriate time in which to do it. But for now, there is the increase from 5 to 10 people with physical distancing.
Next question.
Next question comes from Travis Danrush from Global News.
Hi, Travis.
Hey there, Premier. Good to talk to you again. So I guess, the big question is, what about Toronto, and when could we see restrictions eased on Toronto? I know there's some reporting out there that's saying you're looking at a target date of the 19th. Can you confirm that? And what factors are going to go into the decision for Toronto, Windsor, and general kind of
horseshoe
area?
Yeah, so our chief medical officer is in contact with all other chief medical officers, including the one in Toronto. I'm in close contact. I had a good conversation with Mayor Tory. You know, we don't make a move in any region without the full consent of the local chief medical officer and most times the local mayor. So Travis, we would be able to answer that probably a little better in the next few days, and that'd probably be a good question for Mayor Tory to answer and the Chief Medical Officer of Toronto to answer.
So, Premier, you were against this regional reopening plan for months, and now that is what is happening. Do you think you could have moved to open some of these areas sooner and done a better job of protecting the economy earlier had you been open and more flexible to this approach as some regional leaders were encouraging?
Well, not really. That was a little too early. If I look back in hindsight, I think we made the right move. And then, as I always say, if you look at smaller provinces or smaller states, a geographical area, we wouldn't make this move. But when we have a province larger than Texas and California, you know, we have to differentiate between large urban centers and rural areas, be it where Vic is in North Bay or up in Kenora or other regions, very rural areas, which we didn't see many cases at all. It just, we realized that this isn't fair to punish people in rural areas because of big urban centers. And so we're going to take this approach. We're going to see how it works out with a lot of consultation with local chief medical officers. And that's what we're going to continue doing, being collaborative with local mayors and chief medical officers. And if everyone agrees, then they go to stage 2, the ones that have been closed.
Next question.
Next question comes from Wendy Gray from Vista Radio. Please go ahead.
Hi, Wendy.
Good afternoon, Premier. Aside from what Minister Fedeli has outlined about WSIB and electricity rates, is there any other financial assistance coming or available to help these regional businesses in these areas reopen and be competitive?
Well, I'm going to pass it over to Minister Fedeli.
Thank you very much, Wendy. I think right from the beginning, when you saw the first thing that our government did was put $17 billion into a package, $3.3 billion into health and $3.7 billion into families and jobs, and a further $10 billion was available. About $6 billion of it was in deferrals that are still coming, WSIB deferrals, tax deferrals, employee health tax deferrals. There are quite a menu right now of programs that are available for the business community. You heard also today about the rent assistance that the Premier announced. If you can take that and look at all of the consultation we do with the federal government, we make sure that there are no gaps, and we also make sure there's no duplication so that we get the best value for the taxpayer. Now, Minister Phillips is heading up the Jobs and Recovery group right now, and we're looking at all of what will be required to complete the reopenings and get on with the recovery of the province of Ontario.
Follow up?
Thank you. Premier, or perhaps Minister Elliott, we've heard you say today that you're allowing people to move freely across the province. But are you concerned that areas of cottage country in northern Ontario will see an even bigger influx of people from the GTA because more is now open? And so I guess that begs the question of what metrics will be used to measure success or failure that may see it.
I think you just cut out. I'll pass this over to Minister Elliott. I don't know the end of the question there. I'll pass it over anyways.
Well, we do expect that people will be moving around more now because some of the barriers have been lifted, but we're going to continue to use the same metrics that we always have to determine success, which is going to be a decrease in the overall number of cases. Today was a very good day, only 243 new cases, but remember we were at 400 and 500 only a few weeks ago. That is the smallest increase we've had yet, which is a very good sign. But we can't sit back and expect that every day. We're going to have to continue to follow it very closely. And we also need to take a look at our hospital capacity. If we see more cases of people with COVID-19 being admitted to our hospitals, especially into intensive care and on ventilators, that's not a good sign. So all of those things are issues and metrics that we're going to be taking into consideration to measure the success. If we're moving too fast, we may need to slow down a little bit. Or if things continue to look good, then we'll be able to move forward and hopefully move those areas they're not moving into phase 2 yet into the next phase. So all of these things are important concerns that we are following very closely at the Health Command table.
Next question.
Next question comes from Randy Rath from Sage TV. Please go ahead.
Hi, Randy.
Hi, Peter. I'm wondering why the opening has taken place strictly on a regional basis. I'm asking particularly about the wine industry in Niagara. These places operate on giant estates. They could easily move their operations outside, have tastings outside, have sales outside. Isn't that something that should be taken into consideration? Should it be done more on a business by business as opposed to a region by region basis?
Well, that's a good question, Randy. You always give me good questions. But really, we have to look at the whole region, who's going into these wineries and who's going out, who's working there, who's visiting them. But I don't necessarily disagree. But let me pass this over to the Minister of Finance. He's on the committee that he's actually chairs the committee on what proposals we send to the health table.
Thanks, Premier, and thank you, Randy. So the regional focus is because, as the Premier said, we are obviously concerned about the health in various regions, and what the health table in consultation with the local public health officials looks to do is look at the cumulative effect of anything. So what the plan does allow, as I'm sure you know, is in stage 2, those kinds of outdoor activities for wineries and others would be possible. And what you may have seen, the Attorney General made an announcement earlier about making sure that the AGCO was working closely so that whether it was the expansion of restaurant patios or even maybe the expansion into a parking lot, if that was possible, for a winery as well as for a bar or restaurant was done more easily. But the regional focus is the focus we need to manage, because the health table and the local public health officials have to look at the cumulative effect. Of course, we're all very hopeful that we'll be able to move those regions, including Niagara and others, to stage 2, but we'll do that when it's safe, and we'll do that based on that consensus from the central health table, our chief medical officer, and the local health officials.
Isn't there the risk that some industries, some businesses like restaurants with patios, that type of thing, will just practice civil disobedience and start operating regardless of what the government says they should do?
I don't think that's going to go that way, Randy. You know, we're here in this position because of the 14.5 million people in Ontario following the protocol, the chief medical officer and their local chief medical officer, and I have all the confidence in the world and in the people in our province that they're going to follow proper protocols as they have from day one. That's the only reason we're able to get here, because of the cooperation of the people and the businesses, and I'm so grateful, and I know our whole team's grateful. It makes things a lot easier when everyone's pulling in the same direction, and you're dealing with 444 municipalities, and with collaboration and consultation. That's the way we're able to do this.
Next question.
Next question comes from Cynthia Milligan from City News. Please go ahead.
Hi, Cynthia.
Hi, Premier. How are you today?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well,
Good.
thank you. In terms of the businesses that are either in the regions that will open at the very end, or the businesses that are in stage 3 that will open at the very end, will there be any extra financial help for them?
You know something, we're looking at financial help for everyone. We can't really just target on people in stage 3 versus stage 2, but if you don't mind, I'm going to hand it over to Minister of Finance. Thank you.
Thanks, Cynthia. So as Minister Fedeli had mentioned, one of the things that we are doing with the Jobs and Recovery Committee is working very closely with all sectors. And of course, their input has been critical in terms of looking at how we can safely make the choices we made and the great announcement today about the ability to move to stage 2. But we're also talking to them about the needs of those sectors. Obviously, some, because of the nature of the business, are more delayed in coming online, and we're making sure that they have through Minister McNaughton, they have the information they need to prepare. But as the Premier mentioned, what we're trying to do is support all businesses, whether it's through the rent program, whether it's through the various other subsidy programs, whether it's through the work we're doing in partnership with the federal government. And we'll continue to do what's necessary. And as we look to the recovery, right now we're in the reopening phase. Remember the first phase was a reaction to COVID, the reopening phase. And as we look to that recovery phase, we'll of course look to what's necessary to support businesses across the province.
Thank you, Minister. My follow-up is for the Premier. Premier Ford, you have been threatening commercial landlords for some time that not to push you. Now you're coming down with the ban on commercial eviction.
Yes.
What was the tipping point for you? Because people have been calling for this for a long time. So what made you actually take this move? And do you have any numbers on how many evictions were taking place?
Well, you know, our first approach was let's work together, and it's still my approach. Please, the landlords and the tenants, if you can, work together. I've talked to a couple very large landlords over the weekend, and they said, Doug, you know, we have a better package, and well, God bless you. If you can support the little business owner, that's fantastic. This is really geared for the landlords that are coming down heavy on the little business, kind of the mom and pop shop, the smaller businesses that they were going after, and I could never understand that. We wanted to give them, it's been about a week and a half, close to 2 weeks, to see the uptick of the offer that we gave, and found out there was only 7,000 people that really took us up on the offer, and it was a very generous offer from ourselves and the federal government. And they you know, some people weren't playing ball. But again, I want to stress this. You know, not all landlords are bad. There's some really, really good landlords. They understand it's in their best interest to help these businesses get through these tough times until they can be good tenants for a number of years and grow their business. It's common sense. People aren't lining up. If one business goes under, there's not 10 people lining up to get into that building. It's just not happening. So in the best interest of everyone, just support them. It's not a long period of time, and you're getting compensated. So I thought it was a great deal, but I'll always protect the little guy, these little businesses all the time. That's the backbone of our economy, the backbone of Ontario. True entrepreneurs getting out there and trying to put food on their table. And then these people struggle at the best of times, not to mention through this pandemic.
Next question.
Next question comes from Brian Lilly from the Toronto Sun. Please go ahead.
Hi, Brian.
Hi, Premier. You just mentioned the people trying to work hard to put food on their table, and following up on Randy's question, what's to say that they wouldn't or shouldn't just start ignoring emergency messages? We saw over the weekend protests throughout the province, massive protests in Toronto over 2 days. We've seen the Trinity Bellwoods Park before. We've seen weeks of protests outside Queen's Park with no enforcement. The Prime Minister even took part in a protest with no social distancing. Not everyone was wearing masks, and there was no enforcement. Yet steps from there, a restaurant gets fined for letting people eat on their patio. So if there's not enforcement of the rules for everyone, why should business owners say, you know what, I'm going to keep listening to the Premier, to the province, and sacrifice my livelihood when others aren't?
Well, I understand the question, and for the most part, vast majority of the people are listening. And as for the protests, people are hurting. You know, certain communities are hurting out there, and I understand the protests, and I understand a lot of them were social distancing, and some weren't, but they're in pain right now. And collectively, as a province, we're all going to work together to fix that. As for the Prime Minister being out there, you're going to have to ask him that question. But I truly believe in the people of Ontario, and the people of Ontario have stuck with us. We're on the same team, and yes, there's been a few incidents, but the vast majority of the people across this province have been working well together with us. And as I always say, we're all in this together. So we'll get through it together too.
Well, I understand your comment that parts of the province, certain communities are hurting. I understand the reason for the protest. But throughout this, you've had how many thousands of people that have not been able to say goodbye to a loved one as they passed, missing funerals, watching businesses and livelihoods fall apart. So I put it to you again, why, if the rules don't apply to everyone, should they apply to anyone?
Well, we put out the rules, and most people have focused on self-isolation at the time when we needed it, social distancing. The vast majority of the people have listened, Brian, and I just want to continue down that road. And we're very close to reopening the rest of the province to stage 2, just working with the chief medical officers and getting their input. But I understand what you're saying. I really do. But I think for the most part, everyone's doing a great job out there. Everyone's helping out, pitching in. So, but I understand where you're going on that.
Next question.
Next question comes from Mike Abeling from Acadia News. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, Premier. Thanks a lot for taking our question.
Thank you.
Most camps in the Dryden and Kenora area, tourist camps, they really rely on U.S. customers. Most of our clients, 90 to 98%, come from the States. I know you have no control over the border, but what supports are in place or being looked at to help operators to say they may go into business tomorrow?
Yeah, well, first of all, let's address the border. I know the Fed's renewed until June the 21st. This date's coming very, very soon. My biggest concern is, again, this is a federal decision, that if they decide to open it up, we got to pick up big time at the borders on screening and assessing people when they come across, and making sure that we're able to track these folks once they come here. They self-isolate for 2 weeks. It's absolutely critical we tighten up the borders, and that's no criticism to the federal government, but borders were pretty well wide open during a part of this pandemic. So we're going to work closely with them, and if we need to assist them on everything from testing to more people at the border, screening, so be it. We'll pitch in. We'll help any way we can on that aspect. And as for your question, do you know who'd be great? He lives in the north and represents a tremendous amount of people, is Vic Fedeli. He understands the needs of a lot of these fishing camps and hunting camps. So, Vic, if you have a minute.
Thank you very much, Premier. You know, Mike, Minister Greg Rickford in the Kenora Rainy River area continued to fight very hard for his constituents and his stakeholders in making sure that the case for opening the hunting and fishing lodges and the camps, as we call them up home, opened in a timely manner. So, you know, in Sault Ste. Marie, it was Minister Ross Romano, and throughout all of southeastern and southwestern Ontario, the MPPs and the ministers presented a great case on why the hunting and fishing lodges should be open when they were more than a week ago. And now, of course, the announcement today that in the areas primarily the areas you're talking about, stage 2 will open, so we'll see camping and we'll see many, many more outdoor activities. Thank you.
Follow up?
Could compensation for tourist outfitters be something that can be considered? Again, some of these business owners, camp owners, are saying they might not have a business at the end of the summer.
Well, everything's on the table, and I know Minister of Tourism, Lisa MacLeod, is just, shouting and screaming every day at the table saying, hey, I need more, I need to help these people. I get it. But what I really encourage people throughout the province is, we're used to maybe taking a trip down south, across the border in the summer. Why don't we look at our province? why don't we travel around? Why don't we go to it? Because I know a lot of my pals are, they love fishing. So why don't we go up north and rent one of these cabins? And I'll tell you, until you've traveled Ontario, it's such a beautiful, beautiful province. And I'm first to admit, before I was Premier, I covered a lot of Ontario, but nothing compared to when I traveled on the election and going way up in Kenora and just beautiful places. And by the way, so many friends in the Indigenous community up there saying they're going to bring me fishing. I can't wait. I'm going to take you up on that offer. And so let's support our own. Let's support Ontario. Let's buy local. Let's buy Ontario. Let's buy Canadian. That's what we need to do. Start supporting each other. There's 14.5 million people. We're an economic powerhouse. Let's stick together, and we'll get the economy going. But go up to a local fishing lodge, go camping, support our local people. We'll get through this.
This will be the last question.
Last question comes from Snay Dougal from Queen's Park Briefing. Please go ahead.
How you doing?
Hi, Premier. I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Good. Thanks for taking our questions. I know a lot of the focus today is on stage 2, but I wanted to ask you about the final report on the national inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls that was released a year ago. When you met with Chief Perry Bellegarde at the time, you called the findings of the report a national shame and promised to do more. I've spoken with an Indigenous chief with Anishinaabe-Aski Nation recently who said he doesn't think your government has done full justice to addressing this report. I'm just wondering, how would you respond to that, and what progress do you think your government has made during the past year to address this report?
Well, it's all about, first of all, understanding the communities and relating to their concerns and feeling the pain that they've gone through. And if you ask, first of all, the regional chief, Archibald, which is an incredible leader and is doing incredible work, and all the other chiefs that I've met, we've built up an incredibly strong relationship right across this province. And I give all the credit to Minister Greg Rickford. Greg Rickford was a nurse and lived with First Nations communities for 7 to 8 years. As I've talked to a lot of chiefs, it's like part of their family. He was in there helping these communities when they needed help most, and no one was listening to him. And as far as I'm concerned, he's the best Minister for Indigenous Affairs. So we're going to continue working with him and supporting him every which way we can. We have a phenomenal relationship with First Nations, and I appreciate their support and the great work that they do on a daily basis.
Follow up?
Thank you. And one of the recommendations in the report was for governments to implement the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People into law. British Columbia took that step last year, and the NDP have introduced such a bill here at Queen's Park on that. It's been sitting at committee for more than a year now. I'm wondering if you see this bill as a step towards reconciliation, and will you commit today to getting this bill passed?
Well, there's never one step to reconciliation, in my opinion. There's always multiple steps, and we have to constantly be doing a better job. And I'm going to be very frank with you. I'd really want to talk to Minister Rickford, but I promise you one thing, I will get back to you with that answer.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.